Good evening, folks. My name is Atrueot. By way of introduction, I have a PhD doctorate in the field of nutrition, and I'm also a licensed naturopathic doctor, ND, Doctor of Naturopathy, a license out of the Washington, D.C. office. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is going to be a little bit scary, perhaps is the best word to say it. As we get into the subject matter, I want to make sure we're all very clear that this is a culmination of well over 3, maybe 4 years of research. Suddenly, you know, as a researcher, when I personally start looking at a subject matter, you get a piece here, a piece there. Sometimes they're disjointed, but in my situation, I take them all, put it into a loose leaf folder and keep track of it. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes things come together and you get a clear picture. And on this particular subject matter, this is exactly what has happened. We're going to talk a little bit tonight, a lot tonight actually, on the subject of the bird flu, the incredible hype that occurred on this subject back in 2005, strongly into 2006. Today, the date is July 13th. It's Sunday evening, 2008. For the last 6 months or so, very little has been talked about concerning the bird flu. More specifically, the bird flu is called H5N1 virus. We are more concerned, I think, in this country about the price of gasoline and the future, really, of our economic structure. Not many people know this, but it's a fact that on March 13th of this year, for only the 5th time in our nation's history, the U.S. House of Representatives was called into a top secret session. A few brave congressmen refused to participate in the secret session, stating publicly for the record that the House of Representatives is a bastion of free speech and they should not be conducting our nation's business behind closed doors and in secret. Now, of course, I do not know what went on in that secret session. All I can do is give reports on some things that were leaked out by supposedly members that were concerned. The subject matter that was advertised was a debate on what's called the FISA, F-I-S-A legislation, which basically is a debate on whether our government has the right to spy on the citizens through telecommunications, through the internet, through any basic means of what is normally considered private conversation. Now, that subject matter is bad enough. What I have heard from what I deem to be reliable sources, there was much more discussed in that meeting than that. What was discussed, as I have been told, is it concerned a complete economic meltdown of the U.S. economy in early 2009, but a major event, a quote, major event happening in the fall of 2008, September and into October. I would submit that something major has to be occurring for the powers that be to feel the need to have such a secret session of Congress. Looking back in my research, I found a secret session of Congress was called to go over the secession of the southern states back during the Civil War era. I can understand that one. The other secret session I uncovered was a meeting, debriefing on what's called the Manhattan Project, the use of the nuclear bomb on Japan. I can understand that. Another one was the problems facing America during the Great Depression. And I can understand that. So something of that nature, of that top, utmost importance of a subject is what would cause a secret meeting. So I submit that that's a huge red flag. I would submit that is a cause of concern. It spurred me as John Q. Public, as Atrueot the Citizen, to try and find some answers. And as I dug on that subject matter, I found a huge part of the puzzle concerning the bird flu situation. This is what I'm here to present to you tonight. Buckle your seatbelts. I promise you it's going to be a wild ride. And as we talk about these things, again, I want you to understand that to a certain degree, I would hope all truth is objective. I like this little saying that I have on the screen. Truth simply wears no mask whatsoever. There's full transparency in complete truth. Truth seeks neither place nor applause and bows to no human shrine. All the truth ever asks for is a hearing. And what I want to do here tonight is to present a hearing of what I believe to be not only truth, but vitally important information that I personally feel can either save this country, or if we ignore it, can destroy this country. I believe it's that strong and that important of information. I would hope that when you hear all the facts, all of the information, all of the truth as I can present it to you, that you will agree with me and we can have meaningful discussion, and as grassroots America we can pull together and stop this insidious plan from reaching fruition. Again, I ask you, if you believe in what I'm telling you and understand and feel that it is truth-based, to take action, and this is a call to action. Let's begin by looking a little bit at the timeline of the bird flu. Much of what I'm going to tell you here is review. Hopefully it will spur your memory and kind of help you to get an underlying basis of the importance of this message tonight. Concerning the subject of the bird flu, I would submit that there has never been more publicity generated by our government bureaucracy than on this subject. For the first time in history, a division of the federal government, specifically the Bureau of Health and Human Services, or HHS, gave money to major independent networks, specifically ABC TV, and they actually made a special TV movie in 2006. In this movie, they depict a businessman, an American businessman, going to an assembly line of manufactured goods in China, and they're contracting the virus and then bringing it over to America. So the movie is basically showing America that this virus is going to originate in China. And I absolutely here to tell you that's exactly what's going to happen. We have talk show guest experts from Oprah to, every talk show host, Montel, etc. They all have been talking about this bird flu, incredibly important topic. But what you have to understand is, where did this hype, this scare, this fear base, where did it originate, and more importantly, why? Thirdly, Mike Leavitt's Health and Human Service Department received $4 billion, folks, $4 billion with the B, to prepare for what they call, quote, the inevitable pandemic. We all remember this, right? This is what's happened. It's unarguable. It's absolutely fact. All right, let's look at why. the question we need to ask, should Americans be concerned with all of this? Should we be concerned about our children, our elderly, our parents, all dying from this major pandemic? Because clearly the intent is to drive fear into the hearts of Americans. In fact, I would remind you the very term pandemic, the first three letters of the word pan, is the same root of the word panic, which means unbridled fear. So the very root of pandemic means a fear-based epidemic. Okay, again, I want to reemphasize this presentation tonight is primarily designed to explain the bird flu in depth, and I'm going to do so with timelines, hopefully with clear-headed logic. And I do this because, at least in my situation, when you understand a subject from front to back and completely know it, the fear goes away. And once you understand this subject, at least if you agree with me, you'll find the fear is replaced by anger at how you've been manipulated. I would submit that the individuals that have created this pandemic threat, they are the real danger to America today. I'm going to show you why that's true. We don't need to fear a pandemic of viral infections. We need to fear the people that are manipulating this process. Let's talk a little bit of science and then a little bit of background. What exactly is the so-called bird flu? The bird flu, of course, is a slang term given to a specific strain of influenza virus, specifically the H5N1 virus unique to birds. Virologists have long determined that normally the H5N1 is unique only to birds. It's found naturally in most wild bird populations, and guess what? There's zero mortality normally passed, and it's typically not passed on to humans. You see, it's only when bird populations become overstressed because of massive contamination of their environment or overpopulation of the flock does the cellular terrain of the flock as a whole begin to change because of the undue stress on the population. This is what causes the virus to become dangerous. The virus doesn't change as much as the immunity of the bird population changes. You see, H5N1, the so-called bird flu, has been identified in manuals clear back in 1910. It's nothing new. Anytime you have birds that, like a flock of ducks that become too overpopulated to maintain their habitat, their immune system decreases, they become more susceptible to the virus, which becomes lethal to them. It's Mother Nature's way of keeping the population in check. It's totally natural. It's not designed ever to pass from birds to humans. So why all the hype? If what I said there is just absolutely true, which I'm telling you it is as a naturopathic researcher, you have to understand the only way that the H5N1 bird influenza virus can become lethal to humans is proliferation of mutations. Why? Because of specific environmental toxins, environmental pollutions can cause the mutation. These mutations would never occur naturally. Now keep in mind this truth. The H5N1 virus is one of only 1,500 known viruses. There's many, many viruses. The vast majority are absolutely benign and not lethal whatsoever. It takes genetic manipulation either in the laboratory or by man-made contaminants in the environment to cause a deadly mutation to occur. Are we clear on how that works? How that, 'cause that's an important point to understand. Now, you don't hear anything about the bird flu pandemic without the government officials saying, oh, this is exactly like the 1918 pandemic. This is identical to what happened to us, to the world in 1918. Just like other host-specific viruses, such as H5N1 avian flu, of course, humans have seasonal influenza viruses every year as well. The same thing is true with our seasonal human viruses. They are designed by nature to be a cellular cleanse. Typically, it's a good thing to have the flu once every year or so. It cleanses out your cells, increases your white blood cell count, increases your immune system. It's Mother Nature's way of house cleaning. This is from a naturopathic viewpoint and looking at what the terrain of the cell is all about. Once again, let me emphasize, it's only when outside pathogens are introduced to a normally benign natural viral process does this virus mutate into one that's highly toxic. Okay, here's some truth that you need to understand about the 1918 pandemic. I just recently republished this book called The Horrors of Vaccination, written by a man named Charles Huggins in New York City. Charles Huggins documents in this book what has gone on with the experimentation of the human being with vaccines. Very well done, very well documented, actually prepared primarily as a manual to present to President Wilson to stop the mandatory required vaccinations of servicemen. All right, because as he points out, many people died because of mandatory vaccinations to our servicemen. The 1918 pandemic was because of vaccinations, nothing else. That is a truth that you won't hear discussed on the nightly news, but absolutely critical to understand. Between 1900 and 1912, researchers funded by a man named John D. Rockefeller began mass vaccination campaigns primarily aimed at smallpox. These vaccination injections eventually broadened in their scope to cover influenza as well. Now, in 1914, that was the year what's called the Great War, we know now as World War I, begins in Europe. The U.S. didn't really enter officially World War I by declaring war on Germany until 1917, when President Wilson finally declared war following the sinking of the Lusitania, the luxury liner. U.S. training bases in 1917, in the summer, were quickly established in Spain. Follow the trail. Follow what happened. In the spring and summer of 1917, America goes into full production of all of our war material, began manufacturing bullets and bombs, machine guns and guns. American men are all drafted into military service and are quickly deployed for training bases in Spain. All new recruits are given mandatory vaccinations, one of which is a broad-spectrum influenza vaccination. John D. Rockefeller's company makes millions in vaccine sales while consolidating his Standard Oil contracts worldwide. We're going to talk in depth about this and how it links together. So there you have it, the broad-spectrum influenza vaccination, along with a number of other live cell inoculations, occurred to all these many thousands of servicemen. Now what happens next? Following this mass vaccination and their injections, the U.S. soldiers are immediately crowded into these large troop convoy ships, and they're sent to train in Spain. As they go into the sea and ocean after getting an injection of influenza, the record shows that the vast majority of servicemen contracted flu symptoms on their voyage. I can just only imagine the horrors of that trip. Being inoculated, having the flu and nausea, and then having the seasickness going on. It must have been just an absolutely horrific trip. Immediately after arriving in Spain, what happens then? The U.S. soldiers are trained primarily for the various forms of gas that they will obviously experience in the trenches in France. Now, some of these training exercises included, imagine sleeping in your bunk, you're already sick of the flu, you're trying to get over high fevers, diarrhea, vomiting, that trip just about killed you coming over, and you're trying to get some sleep, and at 4 in the morning, a burly sergeant throws a gas canister into your barracks, and you have seconds to get your gas mask on. They want to do it. They did this often and very frequently to get the servicemen used to putting the gas mask on quickly. Folks, exposure to these toxic chemical gases in conjunction with that influenza virus that was injected is exactly what caused the 1918 pandemic. That is how it happened. Millions of young, healthy men and women, here's the key, healthy men and women aged 18 to 34, which is the age of the draft, the age of their servicemen. It's that age bracket that were affected by this particular strain of deadly virus. It was very strange. Young teenagers, children, this didn't do anything to them. People over 40 years old typically didn't have a mild case. It was most virulent and killed more people between ages 18 and 34. The cream of the crop of healthy adult men and women. That's who were mostly killed by this pandemic. What happened in 1919, 1920? When Charles Higgins wrote his book, the pandemic had pretty much wound down. As typically happens when the contaminants that causes a mutation have gone away, Mother Nature reverses the mutation, and the virus goes back to normal stature. Do you see the truth of this? Well, of course, we know that Germany was defeated soon after America entered the trenches. And following the end of the Great War, the heads of the various multinational banks, isn't this interesting? It's the bankers that met in conference at San Remo in 1924 to place war reparations on Germany. John D. Rockefeller and the Rothschild families greatly consolidated their wealth at this time. Why? Because they funded both sides of the war. They heavily invested into Germany and they heavily invested into the Allies. No matter who won, they would reap a great profit. Soon after, Rockefeller officially formed a French oil conglomerate under the umbrella of Standard Oil of New Jersey. He did this on March 28, 1924, and named it Total. How many here has heard of Total Oil Company? See, most Americans haven't. Total, it was very literally the French connection, the French Company of Petroleums, also known as CFP, Company of French Petroleums. Rockefeller's Total Company was then awarded, get this, a controlling interest. Deutsche Bank had a controlling interest in the Turkish oil company. As part of the war reparations, the board transferred this to Rockefeller's control. Turkish Petroleum Company was located in Baghdad and eventually was renamed the Iraq Petroleum Company. It was eventually confiscated and nationalized completely by Saddam Hussein in the year 1990. Today, Total Inc. is a true multinational mega corporation. Keep this totally in your mind as we talk the rest of the presentation. Total operates in more than 130 countries and has over 110,000 employees. Not surprisingly, two of Total's prime, wholly owned subsidiaries are the pharmaceutical giants, Sanofi Aventis and Sanofi Pasteur. Folks, these are the world leaders in the development and testing of experimental, I repeat, experimental vaccines, and they manufacture primarily in mainland China. Those of you here in attendance have probably not had a chance to review a DVD I did with Lynn approximately, 3 years ago. It's called The Trial of the Century. I will make that available to anybody that wants a copy. I go into great detail about John D. Rockefeller's two-pronged monsters, two-headed hydra. John D. Rockefeller specialized in oil, we all know that, but he really started also the pharmaceutical combines. John D. Rockefeller began the American Medical Association, began to, and absolutely created the curriculum for all of our current medical colleges, and created the medical establishment as we know it today. That we can thank John D. Rockefeller for that. So he has two focuses, oil and drugs and oil. And I'll make that available to you. It's called The Trial of the Century. You have to understand that whole series to understand the importance of Sanofi Pasteur, the link to John D. Rockefeller in Europe. See, he's doing the same thing here with Total. Total focuses on pharmaceuticals and oil holdings. That's primarily what they do. Same operation. In case you haven't seen it, here is Total's world headquarters in La Défense Plaza in Paris, France. Beautiful, beautiful, shining chrome mirrored walls. And would you like to see their logo? Here is their corporate logo. Notice the all-seeing eye that's veiled, designed to show that it's covering the globe. That's Total's corporate logo. Sad thing is, most Americans haven't heard of this company. But I'm guaranteeing you it's going to affect your life in the next decade. So, what is causing the H5N1 virus to infect humans? We know that it has infected humans. You know what? There's only been 300 known cases, though. A little over 300 cases worldwide. But all human cases of the H5N1, they've all occurred in areas of the world where birds are in abnormally large concentrations, such as the large factory farms in mainland China, and where the residue of extremely toxic chemicals are concentrated in high amounts. Here's just two of the prime examples. Most of the human cases of bird flu occurred in mainland China's factory poultry farms and a hot spot in Vietnam, specifically where thousands, literally tens of thousands, of gallons of Monsanto chemicals, such as Agent Orange, were dumped onto the ground, into the water, at the end of the Vietnam War when American troops pulled out. They didn't take the chemicals with them. They left them there, dumped them in large amounts on the ground. It's that area where the bird flu has come and crossed over into human. Again, that's exactly what I'm talking about. The bird flu, the pandemic of 1918 would never have occurred without vaccinations combined with toxic gases. Would never have happened. Well, there's good news. Who wants to hear the good news? Well, I like to hear the good news first. Good news is influenza viruses soon revert back to their benign state within 2 years of mutations if left to nature's design. And again, fortunately, this is exactly what happened with the 1918 mutated so-called Spanish flu. Again, why was it the Spanish flu? It came from the American bases in Spain. That's where it originated across the world. But here's the bad news, folks. Modern bioscience now has computers to map and track the specific viral genome sequence in order to customize a virus for military use. This is today what is called a biological weapon. And we've all heard of biological weapons. There are viruses that are basically retrofitted, or what's called retroviruses, and done in laboratory settings. So, again, why all the hype? Here's the big $64,000 question. Let me reiterate, keep in mind the truth about the bird flu. To date, there have only been around 300 human cases identified worldwide, with only 120 deaths. There are 6.7 billion humans on planet Earth. This equates to a statistical infection rate. Are you ready for this? 0.00000004215%. In other words, statistically speaking, you are over 100,000 times more likely to be hit by lightning in your home than to contract the bird flu. Unless, of course, there is an esoteric, hidden agenda working here. Given the statistical factors, why then is Mike Leavitt's HHS and the Bush administration spending billions of dollars preparing each of the 50 states for the, quote, inevitable bird flu pandemic? Are those fair questions? You have a much better chance of being hit by lightning than contracting the bird flu. So why all the fear-based hype? The answer is startling. The answer will shock you. It shocked me and made me angry. Who wants to hear the answer? Or shall we just go away? Let's hear the answer. To understand it, you have to analyze the timeline of this whole thing. In order to answer the why question, let's look at the sequence of events. Let's go back to March of 1997. Anybody here remember 1997, 11 years ago? Did anybody ever hear of a bird flu pandemic ever happening in 1997? Of course not. There's no bird flu, no confirmed H5N1 human cases anywhere. Let me show you this so you know where I'm getting it from. This is actually published in our local paper back in 2003, reconstructing the 1918 bird virus. Scientists look back at 1918 flu pandemic that killed millions. This is clipped on a March 16th newspaper. What it says here on the timeline, I know you can't see it very well with the camera. March 1997, the U.S. Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, based in Rockville, Maryland at Fort Detrick. Folks, this is right from Associated Press article. This is the Research Center for Biological Weaponry in America. Commissions one Dr. Jeffrey Taubenberger to lead a research team to isolate the 1918 flu virus's genetic code. Why? This strain of influenza virus is arguably the most lethal germ in terms of mortality percentages versus infection. Folks, it's far more deadly than smallpox and much cleaner than weapons-grade anthrax. And why? Weapons-grade anthrax will kill you quickly. But when it's put out in the population, it affects everything. It affects the carpet, it affects the house, it affects the soil for 500 or more years. It ruins the environment. It's effective, but it's not clean. That's the drawback with anthrax. And again, why? As a biological agent, if you can kill off people 18 to 34 years of age, which are the fighting age of our soldiers, the able-bodied men and women in this country, what is left? See? It's a perfect, I submit it's a perfect biological weapon agent. And here we have Dr. Jeffrey Taubenberger, who I pulled his bio, I pulled his CV. This man is so close to the Rockefeller cartel, David Rockefeller. When he walks, his shoe sings Rockefeller. Let's go forward. On August 24th, 1997, in Breivik, Alaska. You know where Breivik is? on the eastern coast. I'm sorry, the western coast of Alaska. Research team member Johan Holton sends remarkably well-preserved 1918 flu virus specimens from a frozen body killed by the 1980 flu to Dr. Taubenberger's lab in Maryland. Days later, Taubenberger detects the genetic fragments he was searching for. See, there in the Breivik, Alaska, was one of the outposts for the American Army, and some of the servicemen passed that on in 1918. The people that died there were just put into cheap coffins and buried in the permafrost. They never thawed out. They never decomposed. They were perfectly preserved, and so was the virus that was in their lungs. So here, a team from our government extracts this deadly virus intact and sends it to our biological weapons laboratory in Fort Detrick, Maryland. The virus's RNA-based gene fragments were there analyzed by computer sequencing in order to reveal their complete genetic code. Even with the supercomputer, this code sequencing will take years to complete. So again, this is August of 1997 going into September. October 2003, voila! Taubenberger's team finally deciphers the deadly virus's entire genetic code, completing the 6-year project. Noted biologist and Taubenberger colleague, a man named R.G. Webster, publishes an article in American Scientist magazine that really gets the ball rolling here, where he declares, quote, "The world is teetering on the edge of a flu pandemic that could kill a large fraction of the human population." Again, Webster does not author this article until after the sequencing is completed. And Webster is Taubenberger's colleague. June 2005, at the Rockefeller-controlled Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York, Taubenberger works with a man named Peter Palise and Adolfo Garcia Sastro to create plasmids, or what's called DNA rings. What this is for, folks, is to permanently stabilize the virus for use as a biological weapon so that it won't revert back to its benign status. If it's locked into human plasma rings, it won't go back to nature. It's permanent. Hello. It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. This is the final step in revitalizing a very deadly pathogen. The press is told in this article, their fears are relayed. The press is told, oh no, we're researching viruses. We're researching vaccinations. This is all for the good of humanity. Even though it's at a top secret weapons research lab, it's not going to be harmful. It's for the good of humanity. But wait a minute. If it's gone away, why mess with it? It's not going to ever come back unless we mess with it. August 2005. This is really important to understand. I can't emphasize this enough. The team inserts these plasmas, these locked codes. You insert the plasmids into human kidney cells, which then transfer human DNA into the virus, making it human-specific. Kidney cells are specialized cells that adapt very easily. Adapt the virus to be human-specific. It's not about vaccines anymore. This is a smoking gun, that this is designed as a top-secret biological weapon. The deadly 1918 virus that killed millions of people worldwide, and the virus that nature reversed, naturally its deadly nature, is now ready for use by some of the most evil conspiring men on this planet. Does that concern you? It concerned me. It woke me right up. But I said, well, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. How do we really know this is linked together? Here's how I tie them together. August 2005, next month, September 9th, the United Nations. Where's the UN located? New York City. Who funded the UN into existence? Who donated the land to the UN? Mr. John D. Rockefeller, right? The United Nations in New York City issues a shocking worldwide press release. They introduce a man named David Nabarro as, quote, the UN system's senior coordinator for avian, human influenza. Time frame, timeline. August, the kidney cell transfer is made. It's now human specific. September 9th, we suddenly have avian flu pandemic news. See the timeline? Coincidence? I think not. September 29th, just 20 days later in 2005, fear and panic begins when Nabarro issues an official UN warning that specifically, quote, an outbreak of avian influenza would kill between 5 million and 150 million people on each continent. How convenient is that? Folks, it gets better, or worse. Much worse. October. Oh my gosh, President Bush doesn't waste any time. I'm sure he had a conference with David Rockefeller. I'm sure David Rockefeller told him what was going to happen. President Bush's newly appointed Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Honorable Governor Mike Leavitt from Utah, begins pandemic bird flu preparations in earnest. They prepare a presentation to Congress. Bush and Leavitt solicits Congress for $7.1 billion to fund preparations. They immediately allocated $3.3 billion to Leavitt. Folks, the Health and Human Services candy store is officially open for business. In January of 2006, Leavitt launches their website, pandemicflu.gov. Here he declares, quote, here is a copy of his website information. I downloaded the whole thing. He says, quote, let me be clear, it is only a matter of time before we discover H5N1 in America. Mr. Leavitt, go ahead and check the birds in America right now. They already have H5N1. Okay? It just hasn't crossed the barriers. And it won't ever cross the barriers. It won't ever cross the barriers to humans in America. It just will not. It's already been here. It's always been here from the beginning of time. The H5N1 virus. The migration patterns of the wildfowl that carry the virus makes an appearance here almost inevitable. Again, it's already here. It just hasn't crossed the barrier. Isn't this interesting? The same month, January of 2006, the Chinese host the, quote, International Pledging Conference on Avian and Human Influenza in Beijing. The purpose, China wants to extract massive sums of money from the Western countries. Oh, Leavitt now has $3.3 billion candy store. He commits $334 million in funds directly to the Chinese communists to aid China's research into their vaccine development. March 2006. We talked about earlier, in an unprecedented move, Leavitt's HHS allocates funds to a private television network, and a made-for-TV movie is produced on the bird flu. Leavitt jokes that he wants, quote, the handsomest actor to play his character. Keep in mind that as governor of Utah, Leavitt strongly promoted Chinese business interests, meeting often with Chinese delegates and delegations visiting Salt Lake City. On March 2006, Leavitt declares on his HHS website, just as John D. Rockefeller declared in 1916, quote, this is word for word what John D. said, the best defense against influenza is what? Vaccination. He further declares, this is really chilling, folks, the current U.S. capacity for manufacturing egg-based vaccines is not sufficient to supply our entire population. How many people are in America? 300-something million. He wants 300 million vaccinations. But the egg base, there's not enough eggs to incubate these normal bird flu viruses. So what does he say? HHS is supporting research into human kidney, cell-based vaccine manufacturer producing vaccine domestically. For the first time in our history, the head of Health and Human Services is saying, we're going to work with human kidney cells to create the vaccine. Who did the research into human cell, kidney cell vaccines? Live carrying virus. Who did it? First, back in 2003? Taubenberg and the Fort Detrick Biological Weapons Research Center. Does that chill you? In April 2005, HHS announced again a $97 million contract for the development of these cell-based flu vaccines. Chillingly, Leavitt then declares, now this is unheard of, folks. Quote, the FDA can use its emergency use authorization authority. They never had that until after 9/11, by the way. What the heck is emergency use authorization? To permit the use of unapproved products if there's a reasonable belief the products may be effective. In other words, we're not even going to test it. We don't need to. We don't have to have any type of documentation on what this stuff can do. Doesn't matter. We're going to go full speed ahead and get 100 million doses stockpiled. Is this not criminal? I submit to you, it's treasonous. On April 17, 2007, the Food and Drug Administration, the branch of Leavitt's HHS Bureau, utilizes, in fact, its emergency use authorization authority and awards a license to produce the H5N1 bird flu vaccines to who? Sanofi Pasteur. The approval letter states, quote, we have approved your biological license application, BLA, for influenza virus vaccine H5N1 effective this date. You are hereby authorized to introduce or deliver for introduction into interstate commerce influenza virus vaccine H5N1 under your existing Department of Health and Human Services U.S. license number 1725. However, we acknowledge your statement provided in your submission of April 5, 2007 that Sanofi Pasteur, Inc. does not intend to license this product for commercial distribution since it was produced, here's the smoking gun, since it was produced under contract to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services as part of national pandemic preparation initiatives. In other words, we conspired together to do this. That's proof of a conspiracy right there. Influenza virus vaccine H5N1 is indicated for active immunization of persons 18 through 64 years of age at increased risk of exposure to the H5N1 influenza virus subtype containing the vaccine. Let me reemphasize, this is approved to be injected into anybody 18 through 64 years of age, what? At increased risk of exposure. Let's define increased risk of exposure. According to Mike Leavitt's master plan, once the virus, the pandemic germ, which he is now saying is identical to the 1918 vaccine, or virus. That's key. In his website he says it's the same thing. It's the same virus. As soon as that killer virus is detected on American soil, everybody aged 18 through 64 had suddenly an increased risk of exposure. You see it? Now, November 26, 2007. Leavitt and the Health and Human Services orders 100 million H5N1 vaccines from Sanofi Pasteur. Here's what's really amazing. They have a rush order on it. It's got to be delivered and in government hands this month, July. They want it before August 1st. Why? We're talking November to April to produce 100 million. Are they going to incubate these in eggs? No. How are they producing it? Through human kidney cells. Where are they getting the human kidney cells? China has a lot of those. I'm going to go in and explore how they get their human kidneys. It'll blow your mind. Dr. Dean Lloyd will explain how that works. Okay? Sanofi Pasteur issues a press release announcing the very lucrative contract. Folks, 100 million doses times $15 a dose, 1.5 B by my calculations. Pretty lucrative, isn't it? And declares that the cell-based vaccine will be mass-produced in the company's China facility. Whoa. Keep in mind, China, China, China. Then, when they produce it out of the kidney cell-based vaccine, they'll then ship it in bulk to Stillwater, Pennsylvania for hypodermic syringe-friendly packaging. This is what's happening now as we speak. It's happening right now in Pennsylvania, as we talk about this right now. All of this done without human or even animal testing of any sort. Folks, the FDA is there as our protector. Okay? You know what it takes to get a Gardasil virus vaccine by Merck approved? $102 million and 12 years? Doesn't happen easily. And Gardasil is a joke by itself. This is 1,000 times more potentially dangerous than this Gardasil vaccine. And they're doing it on a fast-track grease skids without human trials, without animal testing of any kind. Is this not a question mark? But you've got to have panic. You've got to have the population of this country demanding it, you see. They're going to have Americans lined up begging for it. And I'll show you how they're going to do it. January 2008, I have a press release here. New story. There were, in fact, covert human trials of Sanofi Pasteur vaccines. They're conducted on 350 homeless vagrants in Poland. According to the London Examiner article, this inoculation results in 21 instant deaths, and today over 200 severely incapacitated, hospitalized, on the verge of death, showing this cure indeed is much worse than the disease itself. It takes about 5 or 6 months for it to really mutate and go into its most viral form. That's exactly what happened with the 1918 virus again. It didn't really start killing people by the millions until after 6 to 8 months. It's an inoculation or an incubation period of time. Okay? Now let's shift gears and talk about the China connection. Should we be concerned these 100 million vaccines are manufactured in China? Mainland China has long been a safe haven for international bankers such as Rothschild. Did you know that since the 1880s, it has also been the primary site of pharmaceutical drug manufacturing? Wikipedia states, quote, "The involvement of many foreign pharmacy enterprises operating in China can be dated back to a century ago. Bayer of Germany began trade with China as early as 1882 before it became IG Farben." Who's heard of IG Farben when you study World War II? Okay. Hest, known as Aventis, where have we heard of Aventis before? Sanofi. Sold its products through 128 distribution agents across China in 1887, becoming China's #1 Western medicine and dyeing provider. dying is funny. They should be dying as in dead. The U.S. Eli Lilly and Company opened its first overseas representative office in China's Shanghai in 1918. ICI, the predecessor of the world's #3 pharmacy enterprise AstraZeneca, began trade with China in 1898 and still maintains its old-time office by the Hangpu River in Shanghai. Folks, as of 2007, there are 1,800 foreign-funded pharmaceutical enterprises manufacturing drugs for Americans in China. I would remind you, in Latin, the term pharmacy literally translates into sorcery. There's more of the China connection, folks. Let me remind you, China was occupied by the Japanese during World War II. Following the surrender unconditionally of Japan, two opposing forces struggled for political control of mainland China. You have communist forces under Mao Zedong, well-financed and heeled by Marxist, Leninist, Wall Street Zionists, international bankers, including Rockefeller, Rothschild. That's who funded Mao Zedong into power. These forces soundly defeated forces of freedom and democracy under Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek eventually was exiled to the island of Formosa, known today as the island of Taiwan. Folks, the modern of the New World Order promulgated by modern Zionists is nothing short of the communist model outlined by one Karl Mordecai. I repeat, Karl Mordecai later changed his surname to Marx. Marx declared that eventually Marxism would in fact rule the entire world. Folks, this threat has never gone away. It's just built up and bided its time in the Chinese mainland. I have here some very interesting books. Two books. Bitter Winds, a memoir of my years in China's Gulag by a dissident named Harry Wu, and his latest book, Troublemaker, by Henry Wu. Two must-read books. If you want to believe that China is benign and not a problem, read Harry Wu's documentation and chronicling of what's happening really in mainland China today. According to dissidents such as Harry Wu and others, China uses mass prison labor in their various factories that churn out goods for sale in America. This includes our pharmaceutical factories. The end result is relatively cheap goods that displaces American factories and makes people like Sam Walton's Walmart Inc. fabulously wealthy. China's human rights record is dismal, to say the least. Today, individuals are sentenced to labor prison for posting politically incorrect emails to friends or family. Here's a question for you. Since 9/11, has America turned closer to the Chinese brand of totalitarianism or less? Have we got more free or less free? Have we got closer to China since 9/11? Of course we have. More of the Chinese connection. International Zionists, communists, they do in fact desire a new world order that they dominate. Folks, I submit it's very simple. The Republic of America simply cannot coexist with such a diseased mindset. They are two opposite ends of the spectrum. It's like trying to mix oil and water. The Chinese communists know this. They're actually saying now that America must be cleansed before it's occupied. What does it mean to be cleansed? How can this best be done? How can you cleanse a population of 150 to 200 million of its population? How do you do it? Nuke them? No, that ruins everything for everybody. Ruins the land, ruins the forest, ruins the water. Can't nuke. Would not a natural pandemic that sickens and kills half of the American population be the perfect first step in their godless plan? You got to put yourself in their mindset. They don't care about us. They have no more thought for Americans as they would swatting a flea or a fly. I don't know how many of you have seen this. This is the Zionist New World Order Guidestones. Where's it located? In Georgia, right close to Atlanta. This is no small undertaking. This is a major theme park area. These are pillars looking like the Stonehenge pillars. They're carved in stone. What does these Guidestones tell us? Here, okay, some more on the China connection. Again, the guideposts of Georgia, the Guidestones of Georgia, declare the Zionist number one objective is to reduce the Earth's population from its current 6.7 billion to just 500 million. Again, the important question is just how is this going to be accomplished? Would they hesitate to use a well-documented biological agent such as the 1918 pandemic influenza virus now that they have it intact? Again, let me re-emphasize, the technology to replicate this 1918 virus couldn't have happened unless we had a supercomputer to do it. There had to be a series of events to recreate it. And it is, from my standpoint, it is the perfect war biological agent. Again, why? It kills, it's more deadly between the ages of 18 and 35. Prime time young adults in this country. So it's going to be affecting. Would they seek to camouflage their newly resurrected 1918 virus, what I call a super biological weapon, and blame it on emergent bird flu when it is deployed? Of course they would. Would they use their Chinese lackeys to initiate the plot, just as they used them to build intercontinental railroads in America? Absolutely they will. I just ordered 2 books, hot off the press. I've been waiting for them to come off. I have not received them yet. It's a culmination of a 5-year study produced by 2 independent researchers, and both researchers come to the total conclusion in their book: the 9/11 attack was in fact ordered and performed by agents of Israeli Mossad. I would remind you the Israeli Mossad is wide-ranging, and they are absolutely ruthless in their tactics. And I would just like to say one thing about that. The Mossad's logo, their motto, is simply, by means of deception, wage war. I have here, and you can download this yourself, this is the annual report to Congress, Military Power of the People's Republic of China, 2006. I'll spare you the gruesome details. As red hot as China's economy has been in the last decade, they have spent double their increase in economy on weapons preparations, specifically targeting America, Canada, and Australia for invasion. Okay? Would you like to know who brokers the arms deals for all of this buildup? Israel. If you haven't already seen it, go get the movie Charlie Wilson's War. Incredible documentary about a true story about Congressman Charlie Wilson and how he single-handedly put through the funding to the freedom fighters, the Mujahideen of Afghanistan. He funded them, the Mujahideen, rocket-propelled grenades, surface-to-air missiles, to equal the playing field of the Soviet Union. Shot down their warships, etc., etc. Folks, watch that movie and you'll see the truth of it. He couldn't have done that. He could never have brokered any arms deal to the Mujahideen, and nobody can broker arms deals anywhere without the Mossad, without the nation of Israel brokering the deal. Watch the movie, it's factual. This report is factual. It shows the funding coming brokering from Russia and America, arms sales brokered through Israel, the Mossad. I am not anti-Semitic, not at all, but fact is fact, research is research, the report is what it is, the report. So that's what I'm talking about when I say they. Again, who are the Zionists? Who are those that put up the guide stones in Georgia? Who are they? Who wants the New World Order to be in existence? And it's not a Christian order. It is an anti-Christian order, and it's that influence that is against Christ ultimately on this planet. Again, that mindset cannot coexist with Christian freedom and the Republic as we know it. They can't coexist. More on the China connection you need to understand. Now this is very stunning. I can tell you my sources on this. There's a place called the Day Institute that basically monitors what goes on in our spy network, our spy situation, are the NSA and the CIA. The Day Institute intercepted this, received it probably from an NSA agent, and it is the actual text of a speech given by the Vice Chairman of China's Military Commission, Comrade Chi Haoshan. And I'm here to tell you, this is a complete wake-up call. I'm here to tell you it's legitimate. I'm here to tell you that the work of Peter Navarro in his book, The Coming China Wars, will completely substantiate the statements put out by Chi Haoshan in this intercepted speech. Many Chinese writers and tacticians have always said it's much better to attack covertly. It's much better to, the ultimate Chinese deception and their enemy is to defeat their enemy and not even have the enemy know who attacked them. That's their ultimate art of war. There should be little question that a bird flu pandemic would deeply excite them. Well, let's not forget how over 40,000 innocent pets were killed with known toxic poisons in the pet food, and they knowingly placed lead paints on our toddlers' toys. They knowingly did this. It was not an oops accident. Here it is, China Speaks. This is direct from Chairman Xi. Quote, "Comrades, I'm very excited today because the large-scale online survey, Sina.com, that was done for us showed that our next generation is quite promising and our party's cause will be carried on. In answering the question, will you shoot at women, children, and prisoners of war, more than 80% of the respondents answered in the affirmative, exceeding by far our expectations." Footnote right here. In 1998, 1999, preparatory before the year Y2K situation, a similar survey was conducted among our military. Would you fire on unarmed women and children, even if given an order? And only 30% said they would have ordered. Still pretty high, but not 80%. Today I'd like to focus on why we asked Sina.com to conduct this online survey among our people. My speech today is a sequel to my speech last time, during which I started with the discussion of the issue of the three islands, meaning Taiwan, Diaoyu Islands, and the Spratly Islands, and mentioned that 20 years of the idyllic theme of peace and development had come to an end, and concluded that modernization under the saber is now the only option for China's next phase. I also mentioned we have a vital stake overseas. Going on, quoting, The central issue of this survey appears to be whether one should shoot at women, children, and prisoners of war. But its real significance goes far beyond that. Ostensibly, our intention is mainly to figure out what the Chinese people's attitude towards war is. If these future soldiers do not hesitate to kill even non-combatants, they'll naturally be doubly ready and ruthless in killing combatants. Therefore, the responses to this survey questions may reflect the general attitude people have towards war. We wanted to know if China's global development will necessitate massive deaths in enemy countries. Will our people endorse that scenario? Will they be for or against it? Well, guess what? They got their answer. The fact is, our development refers to the great revitalization of the Chinese nation, which, of course, is not limited to the land we now have, but also includes the whole world. As everybody knows, according to the views propagated by the Western scholars, humanity as a whole originated from one single mother in Africa. Therefore, no race can claim racial superiority. However, according to the research conducted by most Chinese scholars, the Chinese are different from other races on Earth. We did not originate in Africa. Instead, we originated independently in the land of China. Therefore, we can rightfully assert that we are the product of cultural roots of more than 1 million years, civilization and progress of more than 10,000 years, an ancient nation of 5,000 years, and a single Chinese entity of 2,000 years. This is the Chinese nation that calls itself descendants of Yan and Wang. Now, my friend Dr. Dean Lloyd has actually been to mainland China. He's actually had the ability to learn the Chinese art of healing through acupuncture. And I'm just going to ask him, does this ring any bells to you as far as the Chinese mindset, Dr. Lloyd?
It does.
No, just
It's just the way that he has approached this is a typical Chinese attitude. They think of themselves as being literally the center of the earth. In Chinese medicine, the way they position their diagrams, they don't consider other parts of the world when they're considering China. What's significant about the numerical connection, the five is, there's good and bad in every culture, but there's something very significant about what True is saying here, in that 5 is the foundation of Chinese medicine, in that in my book, I'm an author, and I have made the connection in ancient Chinese that's been translated to New Chinese, translated to English, that the whole medical system is based on a musical scale. And their whole foundation was based on, and this was extremely important to them, about harmonizing the different clans in China. They have different provinces, and these provinces were warring. If you're familiar with history, the first emperor had conquered all the provinces, and to create peace in China, they'd go to any extent to have peace, even if it meant to go to war, to keep China as a whole. So one instance is that the emperor would rule that all the provinces would have their musical instruments tuned to the same note, so that they would all play in tune at that season. In China there were 5 seasons, and every season they would change from one note to the next note, so all their musicians would play in tune. And they took this very seriously, because the Taoists, their connection to earth, their whole relationship with nature, was that they would harmonize with nature. And they thought that the music, if it was harmonious and it was pleasing to the ear, then the families would stay together, there would be no illnesses, their economy would flourish. And for the most part, they were right. They played this music, they would have a harmonious environment. People were pleased. They weren't warring against each other. If they had dissonant music, music that was out of tune, that was single, does it sound like the radio that we listen to our kids today, then they would incorporate these discord and mental problems, these evil emotions. They call them evil. Evil's a big word in China. So diseases are called evils, because they think of ghosts getting into people and literally causing evil things. Well, in relationship to this, 5 is significant because 5 is the 5 phases of healing in Chinese medicine. And it's in the center of the Chinese square, which is 5. And I've made a discovery in my book, I discuss this. If you look on a 9 square, the magic square of feng shui in China, these are not arbitrary numbers. They're put together for a reason, and I figured out that this was a musical scale. In fact, the whole Chinese medical system was based on a musical scale. And the musical scale was a pentatonic scale you know as dun 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 dun. That 5-tone scale was sacred, and there's reason why, in a numerical way and also in an audible way, this matches nature's order. And I do presentations that discuss this incredible breakthrough of us rediscovering the ancient Chinese medical model. They were able to do things with acupuncture in their day and age that we couldn't possibly have imagined. And they were using this in all kinds of healing. In fact, in China, before it was westernized, and it's not a Western culture, believe me, but before they became industrialized and westernized, that they knew the power of these applications. So what he's saying is that the numerical value is one significant component to that. They literally understand the relationship of nature and how it applies to numerical values and measurements.
Okay, Dr. Lloyd, if you can share with us what you told me about the individual that was turned in.
So in respect to that particular issue, this is significant, the number, about the date that's taking place in Beijing. The second half of this is that there's no regard to human life there. And it's hard for us to really understand that, but they're imprisoned people. And for me to just say that without experiencing it, I can give you an example. The group that went over, one of the groups that went over to China for a class was part of the hospital's workforce. And one of the practitioners was showing a demonstration to a woman that was part of our class, and she was a little bit of a big mouth, and she mentioned to the supervisor that he was doing this technique too close to her breast, and she felt uncomfortable, and she made this point to him, and he said, we will take care of this. Well, they did. They took care of it, and to make a long story short, our director, Dr. Dunbar, was downstairs, and he heard this, and I didn't hear the whole conversation, but I got in on some of this, and he revealed to me that the way they handled this is that they handled it completely. This man was murdered, he was killed. For that one, even a suggestion of an indiscretion. And they don't care. They will not stop at anything. The kidney issue that he brought up, they harvest kidneys from the poor. They are so poor that they will pay them to what you and I would be almost nothing, $25. They would take their kidneys and they would give that money to them, and that would be the way of harvesting these kidneys. They take it from dead cadavers too. Any way that they can get the kidneys. And again, this is just not the way the Western mind thinks, but the Chinese will do anything to keep themselves together. Communism is a perfect fit for their culture. They think of the whole, rather than the individual.
Let's go on and talk about the numbers that Dr. Lloyd just explained. We haven't really done it officially on the tape yet, but the key thing as we go on with this speech with Chairman Hao Shan is simply this: 5 eighths. The number 8 is very sacred in the Chinese culture, numerology. It is their sacred God number, basically. Okay. When you have 5 eighths in a sequence, that is perfection and empowerment to them as a culture, and it's a symbol that comes to mean that they have arrived as the ultimate icon on the world stage. Now, will this be happening? How is this significant? Simply this: at exactly 8 minutes after 8 o'clock p.m. Beijing time, on August 8th, 8/8 of this year, '08. So you have 8:08 p.m., 8/8 of '08, 5 eighths. That's the exact time when they will officially open the Beijing Olympic Games. It is their central stage. They've never been on this world stage before. It's very empowering to them. That is when they will have arrived in their mentality. Let's go on and read the rest of this speech. Quote, "During our long history, our people have disseminated throughout the Americas and the regions along the Pacific Rim, and they became Indians in the Americas and the East Asian ethnic groups in the South Pacific. We all know that on account of our national superiority, during the thriving and prosperous Tang Dynasty, our civilization was at the peak of the world. We were the center of the world civilization, and no other civilization in the world was comparable to ours. Later on, because of our complacency, narrow-mindedness, and the self-enclosure of our own country, we were surpassed by the Western civilization, and the center of the world shifted to the West." Dr. Dean just explained they refer to themselves as the center of the world. And now they're saying, hey, because of what's happened in the history, we lost that centerness. Let me submit to you, I've read a lot of pre-World War II speeches by Hitler, delivered to the masses. This is so eerily similar to the Aryan supremacy speeches of Hitler and the Third Reich. It's sickening how close it is. He goes on to say, quote, in reviewing history, one may ask, will the center of the world civilization shift back to China? Actually, Comrade Liu Huiqing made similar points in the early 1980s. Based on an historical analysis, he pointed out that the center of world civilization is shifting. It shifted from the East to Western Europe, and later to the United States. Now it is shifting back to the East. Therefore, if we refer to the 19th century as the British century, and the 20th century as the American century, then the 21st century will be the Chinese century. Wild applause fills the auditorium. Now again, this speech was given to China's brass, China's generals, China's military elite. Quote, "Our Chinese people are wiser than the Germans." Now here he's drawing parallels between them and Nazi Germany. That's really interesting, because fundamentally our race is superior to theirs. As a result, we have a longer history, more people, and larger land area. On this basis, our ancestors left us with two most essential heritages, which are atheism and great unity. It was Confucius, the founder of our Chinese culture, who gave us these heritages. These two heritages determined that we have a stronger ability to survive than the West. That is why the Chinese race has been able to prosper for so long. We are destined not to be buried by either heaven or earth, no matter how severe the natural, man-made, and national disasters. This is our advantage. Take response to war as an example. The reason that the United States remains today is that it has never seen war on its mainland. Once its enemies aim at the mainland, the enemies would have already reached Washington before its Congress finishes debating and authorizes the president to declare war. But for us, we don't waste time on these trivial things. Maybe you have now come to understand why we recently decided to further promulgate atheism. If we let theology from the West into China and empty us from the inside, if we let all Chinese people listen to God and follow God, who will obediently listen to us and follow us? If the common people don't believe Comrade Hu Jintao is a qualified leader, begin to question his authority, and want to monitor him, if the religious followers in our society question why we are leading God in churches, can our party continue to rule China? Quote, the first pressing issue facing us is living space. This is the biggest focus of the revitalization of the Chinese race. In my last speech, I said that the fight over basic living resources, including land and ocean, is the source of the vast majority of wars in history. This may change in the information age, but not fundamentally. Our per capita resources are much less than those of Germany's back then. Why is he continuing to draw parallels to Nazi Germany? In addition, economic development in the last 20 plus years had a negative impact, and our climates are rapidly changing for the worse. Our resources are in very short supply. The environment is severely polluted, especially that of our soil, water, and air. Not only our ability to sustain and develop our race, but even its survival is gravely threatened to a degree much greater than faced Germany back then. You see what he's doing here? He's building his case for attack, building his case for a preemptive strike. Navarro, in his book, explains it very well, corroborates this information very, very well. Navarro says China will self-implode. They can't continue. It's not sustaining. They will kill themselves. But the Chinese know it too, obviously. They did what they did to gain the upper hand on America, and for that reason only. He goes on to say, quote, anybody who has been to Western countries knows that their living space is much better than ours. They have forests alongside their highways, while we hardly have any trees by our streets. Their sky is often blue with white clouds, while our sky is covered with a layer of dark haze. Their tap water is clean enough for drinking, while even our groundwater is so polluted that it can't be drunk without filtering. They have few people in the streets, and 2 or 3 people can occupy a small residential building. In contrast, our streets are always crawling with people, and several people have to share one room. Many years ago, there was a book titled Yellow Catastrophes. It said that, due to our following the American style of consumption, our limited resources would no longer support the population, and our society would collapse once our population reaches 1.3 billion. Now our population has already exceeded this limit, and we are now relying on imports to sustain our nation. It's not that we haven't paid attention to this issue. The Ministry of Land Resources is specialized in this issue. Again, that's what Navarro says in his book, exactly what he says. These resources of China cannot be sustainable. They're going to self-implode. So what happens? What is China's options? Here we go, quote, but we must understand the term living space, Lebensraum, is too closely related to Nazi Germany. The reason we don't want to discuss this too openly is to avoid the West's association of us with Nazi Germany, which could in turn reinforce the view that China is a threat. Let me again, this speech was given in 2006, the same time that we were starting to ramp up the bird flu hype here in America. Therefore, in our emphasis on He Jin's new theory, human rights are just living rights. Now, He Jin's new theory, he's a writer on the art of war in China. Okay, you want to just make people don't outright declare your intentions. By way of deception, you wage a war. Human rights are just living rights. We only talk about living, but not space, so as to avoid using the term living space. From the perspective of history, the reason that China is faced with the issue of living space is because Western countries have developed ahead of Eastern countries. Western countries established colonies all around the world, therefore giving themselves an advantage on the issue of living space. To solve this problem, we must lead the Chinese people outside of China so that they can develop outside of China. Would the United States allow us to go out and to gain new living space? First, if the United States is firm in blocking us, it is hard for us to do anything significant to Taiwan and some other countries. That's again a declaration of the enemy. Second, even if we could snatch some land from Taiwan, Vietnam, India, or even Japan, how much more living space can we get? Very trivial. Only countries like the United States, Canada, and Australia have the vast land to serve our need for mass colonization. Therefore, solving the issue of America, wow, isn't that just like Hitler said, the issue of the Jews? The issue of America is the key to solving all other issues. First, this makes it possible for us to have many people migrate there and even establish another China under the same leadership of the CCP. That's the Chinese Communist Party. America was originally discovered by the ancestors of the yellow race. By the way, that's true. But Columbus gave credit to the white race. We, the descendants of the Chinese nation, are entitled to the possession of the land. Not true. It is historical destiny that China and the United States will come into unavoidable confrontation on a narrow path and fight. In the long run, the relationship of China and the United States is one of a life and death struggle. Of course, right now it is not the time to openly break up with them yet. Our reform and opening to the outside world still rely on their capital and technology. We still need America. You bet they do. In 2006, they hadn't yet got the viruses. Therefore, we must do everything we can to promote our relationship with America. Learn from America in all aspects and use America as an example to reconstruct our country. Here's where it gets really chilling. Only by using special means to clean up America will we be able to lead the Chinese people there. Only by using non-destructive weapons that can kill many people will we be able to reserve America for ourselves. There has been rapid development of modern biological technology, and new bioweapons have been invented, one after another. Of course, we have not been idle. In the past years, we have seized the opportunity to master weapons of this kind. We are capable of achieving our purpose of cleaning up America all of a sudden. When Comrade Xiaoping was still with us, the party central committee had the perspicacity to make the right decision not to develop aircraft carrier groups and focused instead on developing lethal weapons that can eliminate mass populations of the enemy country. Biological weapons are unprecedented in their ruthlessness. But if the Americans do not die, then the Chinese have to die. If the Chinese people are strapped to the present land, a total societal collapse is bound to take place. According to the computations of the author of Yellow Peril, more than half of the Chinese will die, and that figure will be more than 800 million people. Just after the liberation, our yellow land supported nearly 500 million people. That's the end of World War II, folks. While today the official figure of the population is more than 1.3 billion, this yellow land has reached the limit of its capacity. One day, who knows how soon it will come, the great collapse will occur any time, and more than half of the population will have to go. It is indeed brutal to kill 100 or 200 million Americans. What numbers did Mike Leavitt say would die in a pandemic in America?
150.
Same numbers. 100 or 200 million Americans. How many vaccines are produced by Sanofi Pasteur in China? 100 million. How much testing has been done on humans?
None.
0. It is indeed brutal to kill 100, 200 million Americans, but that is the only path that will secure a Chinese century, a century in which the Chinese Communist Party leads the world. We, as revolutionary humanitarians, I love that term, what an oxymoron is that, do not want deaths. But if history confronts us with the choice between deaths of Chinese and those of Americans, we'd have to pick the latter. As for us, it is more important to safeguard the lives of the Chinese people than the life of our party. The last problem I want to talk about is of firmly seizing the preparations for military battle. The Central Committee believes as long as we resolve the United States problem at one blow, our domestic problems will all be readily solved. Therefore, our military battle preparation appears to be aimed at Taiwan, but in fact is aimed at the United States, and the preparations is far beyond the scope of just attacking aircraft carriers or satellites. Marxism pointed out that violence is the midwife for the birth of the new society. Therefore, war is the midwife for the birth of China's century. Again, who funded China Communist into power in 1949? Who are they? The nation of Israel was established just shortly after that by the same funders, the same Rockefeller Rothschild international banking concern. It is they who want the central pillars of the guidestones of Georgia enacted. Don't fool yourself, folks. They have us in their sights. The question becomes, how? Dean Lloyd and I, Dr. Lloyd and I have talked about this over the weekend in depth, trying to put ourselves into the mindset of the Chinese communist leaders. Again, their motto is, by way of deceit, wage war. It's identical to the Mossad of Israel's logo. The best victory for them is for the enemy to not even know who wiped them out. What better scenario than by the bird flu? It's perfect. Again, report to Congress. The year 2006 shows who's responsible for the buildup of China. America, American taxpayer dollars, America's Walmart, Target stores, Home Depot, all the funding, the money that was, the dollars that went to China have gone back, brokered through Israel to fund their war machine. And again, who recreated the ultimate biological weapon. Who are they? What laboratory restored that most violent biological weapon? The links are undeniable. They are there. Well, Thomas Jefferson, in conclusion, said this: no country and no people can be free and ignorant at the same time. And a quote by a man named H.L. Mencken, quote, "The most dangerous man to any government is the man who is able to think things out without regard to the prevailing superstitions and taboos." Are there prevailing superstitions and taboos today concerning China? Absolutely there are. Almost inevitably, he comes to the conclusion that the government he lives under is dishonest, insane, and intolerable. I would throw out one other word to that. I would say treasonous. Folks, you don't have to have a plan succeed to be guilty of treason. All that has to happen is to be discovered, conclusively proven by a preponderance of evidence, and treason is proven. I would ask you, is our current leadership guilty of treason in this matter? I would say so. That's my vote. Now, in final summation, again, let me just re-emphasize. The bird flu is in reality a masterful cover for a very sinister and devious plan to throw America into martial law. Just read Mike Leavitt's pandemic.gov. They say when this is instituted, when the first case of this pandemic flu, this 1918 recreated virus, is discovered, all 50 states will swing into action. Do you know who gets the first shots under martial law? Who gets the first injections of the pathogen? Number one is healthcare workers, our doctors, our hospitals, our nurses, our clinics. Number two is our policemen. The very people that can keep order in this country in a pandemic will be the first ones injected with this experimental vaccine. And it'll be done by law, by demand. These are state-run agencies. They will not question. If they do question, they will lose their job. 100 million vaccines will go to the first 100 million key people, the 18 to 35-year-olds that can best protect this country will be the first injected. I submit that China is designated by these Zionist overlords to be the agent of instigating this pandemic destruction. And again, this is but a stepping stone in their master plan of conquest of planet Earth. Just one step. Will it succeed? Again, I emphasize, is this plan not treason in the extreme? Folks, I wish I was making this up. I wish it was not true. I hope and pray it's not true. The facts are what they are. $3.3 billion spent for a non-existent phantom virus. The real culprit is what was produced in the test tube in Fort Detrick and used as a biological weapon against us. I'm going out on a limb on this one. I'm declaring that to be absolutely factual. So what can we do, folks? What is our plan of action? It's very simple. We got to distribute this DVD far and wide. Make at least 10 copies. You know what? There's no copyright on it. Make as many copies as you can. Distribute it to your friends and neighbors. Hey, start writing letters. Let our congressmen and women, our senators, know that we know the gig, what's happening. Let them know that we know. Ask them what they're going to do about helping us. Okay? They will only give the grease to the squeakiest wheel. We've got to make our voices heard. Folks, vote right now, like I have decided to do, to vote with your dollars. Stop purchasing made in China right now. If his label says made in China, don't buy it. Go and find something that's not. Only then can we make an immediate dent in this plan. It's not too late. And let our retailers know. Let Sam Walton and company know. We've had enough of it. No more are they going to piss on our head and tell us it's raining. It's not going to happen any longer. We know what's up. We will not be a party to it. Now, that's the end of the PowerPoint presentation. I just wanted to again just re-emphasize a couple of things. The Olympics are coming up in about 3 weeks. If I were to put myself into the mindset of these Chinese communists, knowing what I know from Dr. Lloyd, their mindset, and reading Navarro's book on how devious they are. We've got our best prime athletes, the cream of America's crop, going onshore to Beijing. They're recommending, because of the contamination and the disease in Beijing, to get 6 vaccinations, one of which is a flu vaccine. Right now it's not mandatory. It may well be mandatory just before they leave to go. Even if they're not injected, how easy would it be for a Communist Party boss to come into the barracks or the area or inject into the water supply or whatever, the food supply, this pathogen? What would happen to America if our top athletes, our idols, our men's basketball team, King James, what happens if they come down with a virus that's determined to be the 1918 pandemic? Would that create panic and America to jump in line for this vaccine? I say it would. I hope that's not what's happening. The Chinese on 8888 have opportunity, they have motive, they have the capability, they have in their possession, because of the factory connection with the vaccine, they have the pathogen. Will they take advantage of it? I hope and pray they don't. I keep my fingers crossed. Let's look for the future again. I reiterate the secret congressional meeting. I don't know how much of this was given to our Congress. I do know they were told that our country is teetering on a precipice. In fact, part of what they were told, I do know this, was told to expect to hide, to go into hiding them as our representatives, because Americans will be so angry with our representatives for letting this happen. They are looking for safe havens and safe houses. And they're looking at civil war in America. See, these things are happening. We're on the cusp. That's why I came here tonight to give this presentation. I know it's not good news. I hate to be Chicken Little saying the sky is falling. But on a personal note, let me tell you something else. I came into my business of a naturopathic doctor. I came into the business of getting a PhD in nutrition because of a near-death experience I had in 1987 and a recurring nightmare that woke me up at 4 o'clock in the morning, where I saw our cities of America, all of our cities, cordoned off with martial law signs. No traffic in and out. I saw millions of dead Americans piled in the streets to the top of the buildings because there was not enough people to bury them. I saw this. When I saw the made-for-TV movie where ABC TV recreates New York City, all under martial law, barricades, no travel, no banking, no commerce, and piled up dead, buried in mass graves with bulldozers, it hit home for me. It doesn't have to be this way. What is being shown, like I said to my friends and family, why are we showing this if we can make a difference? The time is far past. We haven't reached the point of no return yet. I believe we can still make a difference, but we've got to mobilize. We've got to get this out and absolutely try and make a difference. We've got to try, and that's my message to you. Any questions or comments?
You have 10 minutes. Go ahead.
Yes, this is the key thing. There will not be an election. They have the full means to suspend all election proceedings. Again, knowing the mindset of George Bush, who was never elected in the first place, let's face it, he was appointed. This man does not want to leave power, and that's scary. This could very well happen, like the Chinese defense minister said, happen rapidly. It will happen before Congress even has a chance to debate it. And I'm saying that's absolutely right. This can happen within a week. It happens that fast. Yes, Dean?
I just want to mention
that the Chinese are manufacturing a vaccination. Just as a little footnote, keep in mind that it's going to places like Africa and South America where malaria is an epidemic there. And do you know how many people live in Africa? How many people that can be exposed to this? It's widespread. True is making an argument about the bird flu. I happen to tell him that I know a contact that is connected directly to the malaria vaccine. So, just another heads up.
Yes.
The state of Utah and the latent things laws that if a governor suspicions that there are concerns health-wise, he himself can designate martial law. And if you do not go for the vaccines or that prescribed, you can forfeit all of your assets, and you are mandated to go to centers like a university stadium and have your vaccination. So that was some extraordinary legislation, and we tried to resist it.
Do you know what year that was, Barbara?
It runs in my mind 98, but it was about that
Yeah,
time
the
frame.
time.
Model Health Care Act.
Yeah, and that goes into another aspect. Every state in this union, following the Homeland Security enactment in the law, has established concentration or detention centers, massive ones. The barbed wire is all going inward to keep people inside. Okay, I went out and saw one out in Camp Williams area out by Dugway just this week. It's amazing. It's massive. It's not beyond even the wildest imagination to know in a state of panic like that, you refuse to get the vaccination. People like us that are talking about this and know what's going on, they're the first one to be rounded up and put into the concentration camps and forced to be vaccinated, forced to receive this toxin. Again, the evidence is overwhelming. All of the world's epidemics, modern, have come from tainted vaccines. And these vaccines originate from manufacturers of Rockefeller, Sanofi, Pasteur Group. It's all there. The pieces all fit together so very nicely to me.
When
Yes.
we were going to get this vaccine reactivated, the Spanish flu story, and they had to go to the cadavers or someone dead to make it happen. And I understood that there were 5 vials of it or something like that they had, and doesn't anybody get a little concerned in Congress that this type of thing can happen? Just the scenario that you give of the timeline with activity of our governor.
Exactly.
And the billions of dollars given to his agency. Can we get that in the paper?
I concur completely, yeah. It should be a big concern. Why it's not? Why am I the only one in this country that's put it together? I'm not the brightest bulb in the pack, but you know there should be more grassroots concern over this.
Glenn Leavitt was talking on TV several months back about a bird flu.
The question became what to do in case of pandemic. Leavitt's directives are just people stay in their houses and homes, and there's centers of area where you can go and get help or the vaccine, in other words. What concerns me, I won't dig through the clippings, but at least here in northern Utah, the centers of vaccinations are going to be the LDS Church stake centers. A lot of the non-Mormon groups were concerned about that. What about a Baptist or this? Why should I have to go to the Mormon church? Yet that was put out by directive of Health and Human Services. That's really a red flag as to why why the Mormon Church would want to do that, to have it be the center for the immunization going on. I'll leave it up to you to determine what that means, but it's, the moral fiber of this country has always been, the compass of direction has been our churches. Our churches have been silenced. That's one of the reasons why we're losing this battle. The 501c3 nonprofit corporations are afraid of rocking any boat and making the IRS mad at them, so they won't talk about these things. They're taboo. That's one of the reasons we're in trouble. So,
5 minutes. 5.
that's it. Any other questions, comments? You can sleep tonight after we get done with this, but we should have this ready in a day or so.